Hello my friends, and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be teaching you guys how to solo mega raids in Pokemon Go. Also just going to be teaching you everything there is to know about raids in Pokemon Go. Hopefully I'm going to be answering a lot of questions that a lot of people I've talked to have had. With not understanding quite how it works and why it works the way it does. So on my screen here, I've got some spreadsheets that I've made that I use, and this picture right here, I'm sure a lot of you have seen this. This was one of the first pictures that I went and searched and downloaded when I was trying to learn about the different types and weaknesses and strengths for Pokemon. But this picture doesn't tell you everything, and so that's why I'm going to go into more detail and kind of explain all the nuances and how everything works. So first of all, this screen right here, this is each of the different kinds of raids in Pokemon Go and the DPS required to kill it within time. So a 1-star raid has 600 HP no matter what it is. No matter what the Pokemon is, the raids are universal on how much HP they have and how much time they have, giving you a damage per second required to kill it in time. So 1-star raid is 600 HP, 180 seconds, 4 DPS required. 3-star raid is 3600 HP, 180 seconds, 20 DPS required. A 4-star mega raid is 9000 HP. Now it goes up to 300 seconds, making the DPS required 30. This is going to be our sweet spot because I'm going to basically teach you how to solo every single mega raid and below, because 30 DPS is definitely achievable. Everything below this is going to be sometimes potentially achievable, but really not realistically. Like 50 DPS, the next jump, is really not achievable solo. There maybe are a couple niche scenarios where, like, if you have the right hundo mega and then you like quit and revive and reload and you just stay on that Pokemon, it might be possible, but it's very hard, very niche, probably not going to happen. So we're going to live in this mega raid world. And that, but this will still show you, this will also explain why 4-star community raids are so hard. So have you ever done a 4-star community day raid after the community day and been like, why is this so hard? Like, this is not a hard Pokemon and it's a 4-star raid. Why is it so hard? Well, the reason is it has 9000 HP just like a mega raid, but the time limit is 180 seconds like a 1-star or 3-star, not 300 seconds like a mega raid. So the DPS required to do a 4-star community day raid is 50, which is the same DPS required to do a 5-star legendary raid. So community day raids are actually the same difficulty as a legendary raid. And then we also have 5-star elite raids, 20,000 HP, 300 seconds, 67 DPS. And then our 6-star legendary megas and primal raids, 22,500, 300 seconds, 75 DPS required. Now, I'm going to be teaching you guys how to solo, but realistically, these DPS numbers, they don't have to be solo. It could be duo. It could be, So basically, if you've ever gone into a raid and you've been like, man, we easily killed this with 2 or 3 people, or you've gone into a raid and had 6 people and not been able to beat it, what that means is, if you didn't beat it, you didn't have enough DPS combined. If you did beat it, it means you did. So if you get yourself up to where you're at this like 30 DPS level, the nice thing about that is, even if legendary raids are not easy to solo or not really possible to solo, if you're at the 30 DPS mark and a buddy of yours is at the 30 DPS mark, then you guys combined can now duo legendary raids. So that's kind of the goal, is this 30 DPS mark. Okay, so that's the numbers on raids and how much DPS you need. Now I'm going to teach you how to get to that. And we're going to be using this DPS tool that's over at Pokemon Go GamePress.gg. If you go to PokemonGo.GamePress.gg, there's a tool right here, the Comprehensive DPS TDO spreadsheet. This is an amazing tool if you want to research ahead of time and learn what Pokemon do what DPS. Now, you can also just go with tier lists that have been made. A lot of people have done the research for you. I'm actually planning on doing videos where I put out for every single mega, like the top DPS Pokemon for it. And so I'm going to be showing you the numbers instead of just saying, hey, this Pokemon's tier S and this Pokemon's tier A. I'm going to be showing you the numbers. And obviously it all comes down to like if you have hundos or, you know, how good of Pokemon you have for those. But I'll be showing you guys that. So this is an amazing tool. Shout out to these guys over at GamePress. It lets us see the DPS numbers, which lets us know if we're at a certain point, we can solo that raid. Like if we have the Pokemon, we can solo that raid. It's also going to show us which raids are soloable and which ones are not. For example, there's a mega raid that's technically soloable, but only if you have like a bunch of Hundo, Shadow, Gardevoir, and that's Sableye. Sableye being Dark Ghost is such a unique type that like it's very niche being able to solo him, which is why I don't know if you guys have noticed, if you've ever tried to do Mega Sableye, it feels way harder and you need more people. It's because he doesn't have many weaknesses, because his two types cancel out the normal weaknesses, and so his only weakness is like Fairy. And so you have to have like, there's not a lot of high DPS Fairy. That's kind of an offshoot, but actually since I'm talking about it, let's do it. Let's put in Dark Ghost. So this is the enemy information. This is the raid information. I always switch this to 50. I'm assuming everybody's got their Pokemon maxed out just for knowing like potential DPS numbers. I always click best because basically, you know, you can see Mega Gardevoir's in here multiple times, but really what you want to know is her best combination is Charm, Dazzling Gleam, doing 33. You don't really care about the Charge Beam doing less. Like, you're not going to use that. So we're going to click best. And then the weather affects damage also. But each of these is going to affect a different types of Pokemon to increase their damage, but extreme is just like warning that there's danger and get to safety, get to shelter. So it doesn't actually affect DPS, so we're going to leave it there, so it's like a neutral. So you could potentially get higher DPS in the right weather, but since we can't control the weather, we're going to keep that neutral. All right, so Dark Ghost is what Sableye is. And here's the interesting thing. When we come over here and look at the I made this list for all the types and all the weaknesses, okay? So over here you can see, I'm sure a lot of you know there's 18 types. Bug, Dark, Dragon, Electric, Fairy, Fighting, Fire, Flying, Ghost, Grass, Ground, Ice, Normal, Poison, Psychic, Rock, Steel, Water. Those are the 18 types. And this chart is kind of circular in the sense that this is just showing everything's weaknesses. Yes, it shows its strengths too, but really what it means is, so Bug is strong against Dark, Grass, and Psychic. So if you go to Dark, you're going to find Bug as a weakness. If you go to Grass, you're going to find Bug as a weakness. And if you go to Psychic, you're going to find Bug as a weakness. So it's circular. All this is really showing is weaknesses. Now, what this doesn't show is resistances. So every type has weaknesses. It also has resistances. And that's really going to matter when we get into dual types, anything that has two types, because the resistances will counteract weaknesses and like neutralize them. So something, you can't just say, okay, Sableye is Dark and Ghost. You can't say he's weak to Bug, Fairy, Fighting, and Dark and Ghost. You can't say that. You can't say he's weak to all those because that doesn't count the resistances that each of these have. And so to get into that, let's go over here and look. So Dark is weak to Bug, Fairy, Fighting, like we see here. Ghost is weak to Dark Ghost, like we see here. Now, if we go down to a Dark Ghost dual type, because you can see I've got the 18 here, and then I have every combination. So instead of just 18 types, if you do every combination of the dual types, it doesn't matter if it's first or second. A Bug Dark is the exact same resistances and weaknesses as a Dark Bug. Doesn't matter. So when we do all of the combination, there's actually 171 different types of Pokemon, because you have to think of a dual type as a new type when it comes to weaknesses and resistances. So, okay, let's go find Dark Ghost, which is going to be up here. So Dark Ghost, look at this. Only one weakness, Fairy. That's it. This column right here is double weakness, so super weakness. And this column is just regular weakness. So why does Sableye, who's a dark type that would have these weaknesses, and then a ghost that would have these weaknesses, why does he only have, where is he? Why does he only have one weakness, Fairy? Well, the reason is that they get canceled out by the resistances of the other type. So when they combine, they also combine resistances. And so Dark is strong against Ghost. It has resistance to Ghost, right? And so that cancels out that weakness. He's a dark type, so that cancels out that weakness. He's also strong against, let's see, Bug gets canceled out. Oh, so Ghost must have resistance to Bug and fighting. So yeah, if we're going to actually look at resistances, because all I'm showing is weaknesses. The reason I don't list the resistances is because there's so many. And what I found is if you can remember all the weaknesses, that's already a lot of information. If you try to remember all the resistances too, it's like too much information. You don't need that. You just need to know what it's weak to. Now, I know Dark Ghost, Sableye, is weak to Fairy only, because the resistances cancel out. So basically the resistances of Ghost cancel out Bug and fighting, and the resistances of Dark cancel out Dark and Ghost. So his only weakness left is Fairy. Okay. And so that's all I have to remember. I don't have to remember all the resistances. All I have to remember is he's only weak to one thing, Fairy. Now, the reason that makes this hard to solo, I think Sableye is one of the only ones that's super hard to solo. It's technically possible, but very, very, very difficult. Probably impossible, unless you have perfect Pokemon. So here it is. So we've got, remember, our number to solo a Mega Raid is 30 DPS. So there's not a lot of high DPS fairies. Now you can see Mega Rayquaza makes it in here without any fairy moves just because he's a high DPS Pokemon. That's the other thing, is if you only search fairy types because you know that's what he's weak to, you'll miss potential Pokemon that do equivalent damage. Now the catch is you'd rather use Mega Gardevoir because you can only use one Mega, and Mega Gardevoir is even higher than Mega Rayquaza. So a perfect team would be a Mega Gardevoir and then an entire team of Hundo Shadow Gardevoirs. Do you see how, like, that's the only way to stay above 30 DPS for the entire time? So the only team that can solo a Mega Sableye is, I'm showing you the hardest one first. I'm going to tell you the rest of these are way easier, and you're actually probably going to not realize how easy it is to solo Mega Raids. And a bunch of you probably already could solo Mega Raids and maybe didn't even know it because you hadn't tried, and maybe you've tried and you've tried hard ones, or not tried the right combination, or not known the numbers of like what would actually make the cut or not. Because you can't just take any Pokemon. Like you can't just take a Hatterene. Say you have a Hundo Hatterene, you're like, this is a Hundo Hatterene, and I have it max level. It's 3198, which would be the max CP at level 50. And you're like, but it doesn't do enough damage because look, it only does 25.12 DPS. It's not going to solo. So anyways, knowing that like Xerneas does 25.6, it's not going to solo, you know. And the irony is, you might think, oh, I've got Hundo Gardevoirs and Hundo Hatterenes, but look, there's a Pokemon right here that's not even fairy that has a higher DPS than them just because it has higher numbers. So even though the fairy would be stronger, it'd be weak to fairy. Like if you had a Hundo Dustmane Necrozma, it's actually going to do more DPS, but still not enough, right, for Sableye. So anyways, there is like one world where you solo, and I would love to make this team. I have 0 Hundo Gardevoirs I have 0 Hundo Gardevoirs, actually, so I don't have a Hundo Mega Gardevoir either. I did have 1 Hundo Routes that I turned into a Gallade, so I have a Hundo Mega Gallade. That doesn't help me here. Would love to get a bunch of Shadow Hundo Gardevoirs. That'd be crazy. And then make the dream team to be able to solo it. But anyway, so that's the hardest case scenario, right? I've shown you the hardest one first. Now let's get into like an easier one, and some concepts that will help you understand. So another type I'm going to look at is Groudon. Let's clear these out. Another thing useful with this, so this just goes back to like neutral. This is neutral damage because we're not picking any types yet. So like in this bar, if you wanted to, you can filter stuff. So like if you wanted to, say you don't have any good shadows and you're like, I don't even want to see the shadows because I don't have any good ones. You could type exclamation shadow and it's going to remove all the shadow types. Because that means not shadow. If you wanted to see the list, oh, what just happened? Get me back in there. Okay, it just shrunk because I typed and. So you could do not shadow, and then you could do and not mega. And so now you're just looking at all the not megas, but you'll see primals are still in there, and they're not counted as megas, even though that's effectively what they are. But you could type and not primal. And so bam. This is showing the DPS of all the Pokemon, not including Shadows, Megas, or Primals, because those tend to be at the top of the list and kind of, if you're trying to see what regular Pokemon. And you can see there's some Pokemon that aren't legendary that are higher than legendaries when it comes to DPS. Like Lucario's way up here in DPS. But then you can see there are a lot of legendaries at the top, which makes sense, obviously. So, okay, so let's clear this. Get back to our base. Now we're going to look at Groudon, because if you're going to fight a legendary Groudon raid, a 5-star legendary Groudon raid, he is only a ground type. So he would be weak to grass, ice, water, right? That's ground's weaknesses. Looking at our picture, ground, weak to grass, ice, water. I have it listed here. But here's the interesting thing. When Groudon primals / megas, right? His type changes. So he goes from a ground only to now being a ground fire. And this is where it gets interesting, because if you're thinking he's a ground type, I can bring grass, ice, and water, but then you're doing primal, he's now a ground fire. Guess what? Fire is resistant to grass. It's resistant to ice. The only type that made it through on the ground side was water. And then if you look through to the ground or to the fire type, let's go to the ground fire type. Because you guys, I'm sure you know, fire would be weak to ground, rock, and water, right? But remember, ground is good against rock, right? So, ironically, what makes it through is the water and the ground. So let's go to ground and fire. I think it's going to be under fire, yeah. So right here, fire ground. It's going to be doubly weak or super weak to water, because both fire and ground are weak to water. Anytime you have two types that are weak to the same thing, it's going to actually be 3 times damage. Whereas a one-time weakness is 2 times damage. So in this column, anything it's weak to once is going to be 2 times damage. Anything it's weak to twice is going to be 3 times damage. That's just kind of like, you're not really going to necessarily care about how much damage that is. You can just go in here and see what the DPS comes out to, because it does the math for you. But that's just what it rounds to. If I was going to round up, it'd be 2x and 3x. The way I usually refer to it is not by how much more damage it does, it's just how many times it's weak to it. So this would be 1 times weak, this would be 2 times weak. So, like again, fighting is weak to psychic, poison is weak to psychic, so it's 2 times weak to psychic. Fighting is weak to flying, grass is weak to flying, it's 2 times. So those are kind of easier to remember. Like if they're both weak to it, they're going to be super weak to it, right? But what that doesn't really tell you is if they're resistant to something, it cancels out weaknesses. So anyways, going back to the fire ground here, And again, it doesn't matter if it's ground fire or fire ground. It's going to be the same weaknesses and resistances. So we see Groudon, regular Groudon is weak to grass, ice, water. But Primal Groudon is 2 times weak to water and 1 times weak to ground. So even though he's a ground type, he's now weak to ground because of the fire weakness. And it canceled out the grass because of the fire. It canceled out the ice because of the fire. The water makes it through. It cancels out the rock because of the ground. And then the ground and water make it through. And so I use this chart all the time to like look up, because it doesn't matter if it's Groudon, Primal Groudon, or Camerupt, or like, it doesn't matter, like Primal Groudon being ground fire and Camerupt being fire ground have the exact same weaknesses and resistances. Now obviously their difference is stats. They have different HPs and strengths and defenses and all that, but when it comes to what they're weak to and how much damage they take, it's the same. All right, so, and to kind of just show that here, I'm going to put in ground. All right, so this would be like a Groudon, a legendary Groudon raid, right? And look at what's at the top. The highest DPS against a Groudon would be a Primal Kyogre. That makes sense, right? 2 times weak to water. And then right below that, we're going to see ice, grass. You know, that's another mega. Water, ice, ice. Even with a dragon move, because Black Kyurem doesn't have an ice fast move. You can see White Kyurem has an ice fast move and it's a little higher. Black Kyurem's a little lower because he doesn't have an ice fast move. So even though he's got this big ice nuke, he doesn't have. And then grass. Now, so what we're going to notice is going to change here. You can see if we're trying to do 30 DPS, the problem is right now I'm talking about Groudon Legendary, which would actually be 50 DPS. You can see none of these make 50 DPS, which is why I'm not really trying to achieve soloing legendaries. It's really not realistic. And like I said, there's a couple niche situations where it can happen. But most of the time, no. Most of the time you're going to need a buddy and like you can duo them. You can easily duo this, right? So if it's 50 DPS for a legendary raid, then all you'd have to be is above 25 DPS. 2 people would have to each be above 25. And you can see there's a lot of Pokemon over 25 DPS against a ground type. More than 100, right? This is the first 100. If you have any Hundo level 50s that are of these combinations, you could duo a legendary raid. Anyway, so now we're going to go ahead and add in the second type, fire. And we're going to look. Now, here's what's interesting. Do you see how much this number jumped up? The reason is, this is where that DPS I was talking about. So these are all 2 times damage because they're 1 times weak. These are 3 times damage because they're 2 times weak. These are huge. And I will tell you, these are the easiest ones to solo because they have a double weakness, a super weakness. So like if you only have 1 type, you can only have 1 weakness. There's no possibility of having a double weakness unless you have 2 types. So single type Pokemon tend to be harder to solo. Whereas dual types, they're easier if they have a common weakness. If they don't have a common weakness, it's the same as a single type, right? But if they have a common weakness, like ground and fire both being weak to water, then look at this, 60 DPS almost on Primal Kyogre. Whereas without that extra damage, a regular Groudon, the highest DPS on Primal Kyogre is 37. So that's why the types matter. Because bam, all of a sudden now you're like, oh, I could solo that. The problem is that this is Primal Kyogre and he has much higher HP, and you would actually need 75. So it's still not high enough to solo that. This is why Primal raids are so hard. You need 75 DPS. But anyway, so that's the thing is there's a bunch of megas that change their types when they mega. And those are what you have to keep track of. You have to keep track of, like, so for example, we just had Mega Audino get released. And it was like, not yesterday, the day before. It was Saturday, 2 days ago. So Audino as a regular Pokemon, is just a normal type, and that's it. When he's Mega'd, he's a normal fairy. And so that changes his weaknesses and resistances. Because a normal is weak to fighting, but a fairy is strong against fighting. So the normal weakness to fighting gets canceled because he's a fairy. And so let's look at that. Well, we could actually, instead of doing it here, we could just come look over here. So obviously normal's only weakness is fighting. Fairy's weaknesses are poison and steel. Now, let's see the normal psychic right here. No. Normal fairy. I went too far. I got to go to the fairy one. The order I did this in was I did the 18, and then I did bug dark, bug dragon, bug electric, all the way down to water. And then you just go down to the next one, and you do dark dragon. You go dark dragon, and you go all the way down to water. And then you do dragon electric all the way down to water. That's how you get every combination. But anyways, so it's just alphabetical. So we're going to go to fairy normal right here. Poison steel. So what you'll see is the fighting type of normal got canceled out because of the fairy type. But the poison steel still made it through, making Mega Audino weak to poison and steel. So those would have been the best things to use against him. And if you had thought, oh, he's a normal type, I'll bring fighting, you'll see that would have done neutral damage, or maybe even resisted damage. Probably neutral, because usually if you have a weakness and a resistance, they cancel each other out. It depends on how high the resistance is, on whether it would still have a resistance, because there are different levels of resistance, like very resistant, slightly resistant, anyways. But again, I don't care about the resistances. I just care what they're weak to. And all right. And I guess I could have said this at the beginning, but one of the reasons I'm doing this is I've done a lot of raids. I've been playing since 2016. I hit hardest hitter almost every raid I do. Not every raid, but almost every raid I do, I hit hardest hitter. So I have done a lot of research, a lot of work to understand how to get there and which Pokemon to use. And this tool is amazing for that, because like I said, in that one scenario, it showed it would be better to bring the Hundo Necrozma, right? The Duskmane Necrozma was better than all those fairy types, because it does more DPS. What you care about is not necessarily just what's the weakest. You want the highest DPS. Now, this is based on level 50 Pokemon, which over here it shows the CPs for those. And Hundos. It's based on Hundos, right? These are Hundo level 50 Pokemon. Now, we're not all going to have Hundos of everything, and that's okay. But you can kind of use it as a guideline to understand who is strong enough to do the damage you need. And, for example, one of the first Megas I ever tried, before I researched and learned all this, I just kind of winged it and just tried, right? I just tried. And I think the first one I ever tried was Mega Salamence. Now, Mega Salamence is dragon and flying, and I'm sure you can realize the common weakness there. Dragon and flying are both weak to ice. So ice would be, let's go to dragon flying here, right here. So they would be 2 times weak to ice. And then what they're weak to is dragon, fairy, rock. That's what makes it through. Rock makes it through, dragon and fairy make it through, and ice makes it through. Which means electric doesn't. So flying is weak to electric, but dragon is resistant to electric, so it doesn't make it through. But yeah, so my first attempt, I brought in a bunch of 2,500 ice types with ice moves, because I hadn't done any of this research or figured any of this out yet. And my thought was, we saw that primal, or we saw this Kyogre. Look at how much more damage it does, because it's 2 times weak to it, right? So, but we don't want to get baited into that, because I brought in a bunch of 2,500 ice types against Mega Salamence, and I couldn't beat it. And then I switched to a bunch of 3,500 Dragonites, who are not even he's 1 times weak to dragon, but then I was able to solo it. And the reason is, what matters is the DPS. It doesn't matter if you have the right type, the exact right best case scenario type. CP also matters. So what I found was 2,500 ice types were not doing as much damage as 3,500 dragon types, right? And I didn't even have my ice types were probably some of the best raid DPS ice types. And my dragons weren't. Like, Dragonite is not, he's really good in PvP, but he's not a high DPS. But I was able to solo it. So again, learning the best Pokemon you can bring for the DPS. You don't have to always do the research ahead of time and know like the absolute best, because like like I said, your Pokemon are not going to always be the highest top tier, but you can kind of have an idea of who are the top 10, who are the top 20, who should I be bringing. And I frequently do not shadow, just because I don't have that many high shadows, so I don't need to see all these shadows. And if I already know, like, oh, I'm going to be bringing Primal Kyogre because he's the best, then maybe I'll do the not Mega and not Primal, and I'll just look at the best Pokemon, right? Just to simplify this. And I'll just go ahead and type that. And not Mega and not Primal. Okay, so Ash Greninja, that's kind of a meme because we don't have that in Pokemon Go, so you skip that one. We're using Primal Kyogre, so we're skipping that one. But then, like, Greninja, Dynamax Kingler is the same as Kingler and Gigantamax. It's because Dynamax and Gigantamax only affect when you're in Dynamax raids. Otherwise, you can see they're the same DPS, because when it comes to regular raids, they're the same as a regular Kingler, right? Same stats. So it shows all three here, but it's the same thing. Then Primarina. Again, Inteleon right here. All three the same. Dynamax, Gigantamax, or regular. Now, some of the stuff is like interesting because I'm like, whoa, Crawdaunt is way up here. I had no idea Crawdaunt was high DPS in raids, you know? Samurott, Palafin is not released yet, but eventually he would be good. Clawitzer, Swampert's way down here. So like, one of the things is like, oh, I have 100 Gyarados, but like, and you can see he's still pretty good, 38 DPS, right? Still good enough to solo a regular Mega, 30 DPS Mega. But you know, it's like he's pretty good, but then like look at how many are above him, like Feraligatr, Empoleon, Sharpedo. Like, I wouldn't have thought Sharpedo would be higher DPS than Gyarados, but he is, and that's. Like Sharpedo, a Hundo level 50 Sharpedo is 2466. Now, obviously, he's going to die much faster than the Gyarados because the Gyarados is 38, 34. He's just tankier. But you can see, if you were literally just going for DPS, Sharpedo is a higher DPS. So, Floatzel's on this list. He's 2762. If you just went off of CP, you're not going to know exactly what the DPS is. And so this is an amazing tool from Game Press. They're not sponsoring me. I wish they did. I love these guys. They're amazing. But anyways, so that's kind of the introduction to raids, DPS required, weaknesses, types. Again, there's not 18 types of Pokemon. There's 171 different types of Pokemon with different weaknesses. Because a steel water is completely different than a water, or a steel, right? They're not the same. And there's some that have less differences because they don't have a bunch of the opposing resistances. The more the resistances and weaknesses clash, the more disparity you get. And that was really shown with Sableye. Because that Dark Ghost lost like all his weaknesses except one. And he has no double weaknesses. He only has 1 times weak to one thing, Fairy. And fairies don't tend to have high DPS. There's just not a lot of high DPS fairies. So that's why that one's the hardest. But anyways, that's probably going to do it for this video. This is my introduction. And my plan is, like I said, to make a video for each Mega just to kind of... This is all like the preliminary information for understanding how to do more DPS. And how to solo, and then I'll do a video for each Mega, like Mega Icedino. I'll do the list and I'll show you, here's all the highest DPS Pokemon for that, and then go from there. So that way you don't have to do the research every time a Mega comes out. You can just go to the video and just kind of be like, okay, this guy, or at least know this is his weaknesses with this combination, because like Mega Icedino, if you didn't do any research, you might have thought he was weak to fighting, but he's not because of the fairy type. So anyways, If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful. I hope this taught you guys some stuff, as far as like the fact that you actually can solo mega raids. Yeah, you can do it. You just have to know which Pokemon you're looking for. And then we'll come back. We'll make videos for each mega. I'll even do the megas that aren't released yet. That way you're ahead of the game when they get here. You'll already know what to use and what to look for. So if you watched this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. I love making educational content like this. I love teaching people and like helping them grow and get stronger. And then I hope you're doing well whenever and wherever you are when you're watching this. And maybe we'll get to raid together someday. I love raiding, and I love helping people achieve goals and beat hard raids. So anyways, thank you so much for watching. Be safe out there. Peace.